This is All India Radio, Power of Listening. Under this series, tonight we take you on a journey to the world of yet another magnificent facet of traditional Indian knowledge systems. In today's episode, we shall be focusing on the ancient Indian perspective on leadership. The expert is Shobhit Raj Mathur, educationist and Indologist. Stay tuned.
My namaste to all the listeners from across the world listening to this show through the All India Radio. I presume this is going to be a unique topic to be covered on radio on a New Year's Eve. The ancient Indian perspective on leadership. Why are we talking on leadership on a New Year's Eve? Because the challenges that the New Year brings, the hope lies in our leadership. Look around us. The biggest challenges around us are terrorism, climate change, and depression. But do we have solutions for these problems? The world has been trying many different ways to address these issues. A lot of young people are there in this country. In fact, we are the youngest and the largest growing country in the world. But yet, do we have solutions to the problems that I just spoke about? I would say yes. Yes, in the Indian knowledge systems, we definitely have solutions. But we have been disconnected from our own knowledge systems. And through this talk, I would want to bring a perspective on the perspective of leadership from the Indian knowledge systems. So let's begin. I'm the Pro Vice Chancellor of Rishihud University and the Dean of Rashtraam School of Public Leadership located at Sonipat, Haryana. Now Sonipat is believed to be founded as Swarnaprasth, that is a golden city, during the time of Mahabharata. The earliest reference of the city comes in the epic Mahabharata, and this was one of the 5 villages demanded by the Pandavas instead of the kingdom of Hastinapur. The other 4 villages were Panprasth, which is now called Panipat, Bhagprasth, that is Bagpat, Indraprasth, that is Delhi, and Tilprasth, that is Tilpat. When these villages were not given by Duryodhana, the war at Kurukshetra ensued. You might be wondering, why am I speaking about Sonipat and its connection to the Mahabharata in a talk on leadership? It is important because Mahabharata is itihas for the Indian civilization and has leadership lessons for every place, age and context. Now be with me and imagine that the 18-day Mahabharata war in Kurukshetra is over. There is widespread destruction of many clans who participated in the war from across India. Sri Krishna counsels Yudhishthira to seek knowledge of Rajadharma from Bhishma. Sri Krishna, of course, has the knowledge too, but Bhishma has the experience. This is the discourse on Rajadharma from the Shanti Parva of Mahabharata. We are fortunate inheritors of this civilizational wisdom. In the Hindu philosophy, Rajadharma subsumes all other dharmas. If the Rajadharma is practiced, all other dharmas can be practiced as well. Now let us look deeper into this word Rajadharma. The word Raja comes from Ranj, a Sanskrit root which means to please. The one who pleases his subjects is a Raja. But what do we mean by pleasing subjects? Does it mean giving freebies like what we see today? No, it means 2 things. One is Yogakshema, that is, arranging for the acquisition of what the people lack and the preservation of what they already have. And the second thing is Lokasangraha, making people undertake their own duties and preventing them from taking the wrong path. So Yogakshema and Lokasangraha are the duties of the king or his Rajadharma. So let us come back to the Mahabharata and look at Yudhishthira's conversation with Bhishma. Yudhishthira asks Bhima, those who are learned about dharma say that Rajadharma is a supreme dharma. O king, I think that is a great burden. Tell me about this, O grandfather. In particular, tell me about Rajadharma. All the beings in the world find a refuge in Rajadharma. O Kaurava, the 3 Vargas are dependent on Rajadharma. All the forms of Moksha Dharma are also clearly based on it. And then Bhishma teaches Yudhishthira on Rajadharma or his lessons on leadership. There were 26,000 shlokas told over 8 to 10 days. These covered issues like importance of being a king, the role of citizens, Dandaniti, general principles of governance, administrative structure, wealth, finance, the tax system, strategies to deal with enemies, protection of the fort, kingdom and people, the king's knowledge, behavior and character. So you can imagine the range of topics that were covered by Bhishma to Yudhishthira on Rajadharma. Did we ever imagine that our ancient knowledge systems had such a detailed perspective on leadership, particularly public leadership, delivered in such a well done fashion? Most importantly, Bhishma also spoke on the importance of being a Jitendriya. Let us look at the translation of some of the verses. A king should first gain victory over his mind. He should not try to do the Rajakaryas, whichever way the mind pulls. A second verse says, mind, which by nature is very volatile and changing, should be reined in by Dharma and Viveka. Then he should try to win the enemies. Very importantly, Bhishma also says, how can a king who has no control over his own mind gain victory over enemies? This is a very unique definition of a leader, which you don't see anywhere else in the world. The focus on conquering your senses, that is being a Jitendriya, is very, very important, and Bhishma emphasizes this repeatedly. Now let us cut to a more recent time. Recent in, of course, India's history is thousands of years. So 2000 years ago, Kautilya, also known as Chanakya, said, nations are built by leaders who master their senses. The Chanakya Sutra, that has about 572 sutras, very elaborately talks about leadership. And I'll just speak out the first 6 sutras of the Chanakya Sutra. The first sutra says, Sukhasya Moolam Dharmaha. That is, the basis of Sukha or all pleasantness is Dharma or righteous conduct. And then he says, Dharmasya Moola Artha. The basis of Dharma is Artha or wealth. Arthasya Moolam Rajyam. That means the basis of Artha is Rajya or the state. Rajyasya Moolam Indriya Jaya. The basis of stability of the state lies in control over the Indriya or the sense faculties providing pleasure. So can you see this continuity of thought from the Mahabharata to Chanakya, and repeatedly this focus on leadership and leadership being Indriya Jaya or Jitendriya is very important. If you look around and look at our leaders today, you will notice that most of their failings are because they don't have a control over their senses. They might have the best education, they might have the best work experience, they might have a very good team as well. But if they lose control over their senses, that is where all things fall apart. So it's very important that this was recognized and elaborated of how it can be done. You might all wonder, right? Being a Jitendriya is great, but how is it achieved? So the next 2 sutras in the Chanakya Sutra talk about this. Indriya Jayasya Moolam Vinaya. The basis for control over sensual faculties is Vinaya or humility. And how does one develop humility? The next sutra says, Vinayasya Moolam Vriddhopaseva. The basis for humility is devotion to those grown old through wisdom. So by serving those who have grown old through wisdom, you develop Vinaya. Vinaya helps you develop a control over your senses. And by controlling your senses, you can control the state. If you control the state well, you can control the wealth generated for the people. Wealth brings dharma and dharma brings sukha. And sukha is what all of us are looking forward to. So that is the greatness of Chanakya's thought and the way he has elaborated on Indriya Jaya and how to achieve that. So I want to conclude this section of the talk by summarizing the meaning of leadership from the Indian perspective. We saw the continuity from Mahabharata to Chanakya Sutras and how Indriya Vijaya is seen as the important quality of a leader. Now let us move on. One of the most puzzling questions when it comes to leadership is whether leaders are born or are they made? Do we have an answer to this question? Again, let us look at the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata in the Udyoga Parva has perhaps an all-encompassing description of the learning process. I will read out one of the verses from the Udyoga Parva of Mahabharata. Acharyat padam adate, padam shishyah swamedhaya, kalen padam adate, padam swabhrahmachari bihi. That is, a student learns one-fourth from his teacher, one-fourth from his own intelligence, one-fourth with the passage of time, and one-fourth from his peers. Cut to the modern day time. What is the education that we have? How much are we learning from the teacher? We all expect that students, when they go to the classroom, would learn the maximum from the teacher. But Mahabharata has had a very different description of learning, as we have just seen. The learning from the teacher is just one-fourth. One-fourth comes from your own intelligence. And how do you unlock that? One-fourth comes from your peers. And one-fourth comes only with the passage of time or experience. So this is the learning process that we should have, and that is how you can create leaders. This description of the learning process has only become more relevant with time. Each part of this verse is profound. First, the teacher is not just an instructor or an adhyapak, but is referred to as an acharya, someone who is to be emulated, whose acharya you will follow. That is, learning by being in the presence of role models. How often do we have role models in our classroom? Are teachers our role models? That is what this verse is saying, that you should learn from role models. Secondly, the verse mentions learning emanating from swamedha, that is, the innate intelligence in every being. We all have an innate intelligence that needs to be honed and brought out. Thirdly, this verse emphasizing that learning is a lifelong process. You learn with time. Learning does not end at graduation. We keep learning from experience throughout life. And lastly, it talks about learning from peer interactions. That is, learning by being in the company of inspired co-learners. If you look today, do we have those peer interactions? We spend most of our time either in the classroom or in the playground, and now today on social media. But it is very clear what it said here. The teacher, the peer interactions, unlocking your own innate intelligence, and having great life experiences. That is how learning happens. The above idea of learning establishes that you need to be in the right learning environment for learning to happen. Teachers who are also mentors, reflective exercises, immersive experiences, and the right peer group. The Indian thought on education has been the same throughout these different years. It goes against the tabula rasa theory that says that learning is outside in. In India, learning is an inside out process. Swami Vivekananda famously said, education is the manifestation of perfection already in man. Kautilya identified the innate talent in Chandragupta and made him into the Raja India needed at that time. Today, once again, we need leaders who can awaken India not just for her needs, but to elevate global consciousness. Our civilizational wisdom has given us tools to create such leaders systematically. We have discussed lessons on leadership from the Mahabharata and the Chanakya Sutras. Do we have more lessons on leadership from the Indian knowledge corpus? Let us look at Ramayana and Sri Rama's life. Among the Indian pantheon of public leaders, Sri Rama stands out as the most revered. His rule is considered the benchmark for an ideal Indian state to this day. Rama Rajya, you would have heard this very often in many political speeches and in your sociology classes as well, perhaps, that Rama Rajya is quoted as an ideal Indian state. So what would he teach us on leadership today? We can have a glimpse of this in the Valmiki Ramayana. Now let us relook into the Ramayana. The Ramayana is popularly known as the biography of Sri Rama. The beauty of the Indian epics is that they are not merely historical records. They carry timeless lessons for humanity. Every generation has read them and applied it in their context. But the application need not be limited to personal life alone. These epics need to be explored as political texts as well. They describe the polity and political leadership of their times. Reading them as a political text can help the present public leaders learn from their ancestors. The treasure of our intellectual civilizational heritage is yet to be discovered completely. However, I hope what I'm going to say next is going to encourage you to explore the Ramayana further in this light. In the Ramayana, as we all know, when Bharata realizes that Sri Rama has been sent to a 14-year exile, he leaves in the search of Sri Rama. He reaches Chitrakoot and pleads Sri Rama to abandon his exile and come back to Ayodhya. He wants his elder brother to take over the reins of the kingdom. In a beautiful conversation between the two, Sri Rama gives the lessons of Raja Dharma to Bharata. The wisdom and principles elucidated by Sri Rama are timeless and relevant to this day. The 100th chapter of the Ayodhya Kanda of the Valmiki Ramayana has the above mentioned conversation between Bharata and Sri Rama. While inquiring about the welfare of his father Dasharatha, Sri Rama gives instructions to Bharata on Rajadharma. Bharata takes these lessons back home and rules on behalf of Sri Rama for the next 14 years. The 100th chapter of Ayodhya Kanda has 76 verses, and I am going to read out a few of them. So when Sri Rama talks to Bharata on what are the typical failings of a king, he asks Bharata whether he is abstaining from the following 14 failings that are typically found in a king. Now, what are those 14 typical failings of a king? Let's listen carefully. The first is Nastikyam, that is atheism. The second is Anrityam, that is falsehood. Third is Krodham or anger. Fourth is Pramadam or inattention. The fifth is procrastination. Sixth is evading the wise. Then he elaborates on this indolence, gratification of senses, planning alone in the affairs of the kingdom, consultation with people who are proficient in worthless acts, failure to implement decisions, inability to keep a council secret, omissions of auspicious practices, and setting out against all the enemies at the same time. So you can see 14 typical leadership failures is what Sri Rama tells Bharata, and he asks Bharata, are you abstaining from these? This is a comprehensive list of what not to do when in a public leadership position. If you look at the current contemporary leaders, you can easily map out the failures in this list. It includes all the modern leadership mantras that focuses on external skills along with spiritual and ritual elements. It is important to understand that without conquering your interiority or conquering your senses, you cannot lead. Conquering interiority needs rituals and wise counsel. Hence, Sri Rama aptly elucidates the importance of conquering one's senses and emotions, the rituals to achieve the same, and the company you need to keep. Now, after saying what not to do, in the next few verses, he gives the entire lecture on public leadership to Bharata on what he should be doing. Most importantly, the first thing he says is subjugation of senses or Indriya Jaya. Then he talks about the knowledge of the Vedas, various ways of achieving peace, the dana, the dhanda, the dissension, bheda, the mandalam, how you create a circle of influence, the 7 limbs of the state, the 8 subjects every king should know. These very important topics like agriculture, trade, defense, building bridges, mining, extraction of tributes, taxes, building emergency shelters, how to build forts, how to design a strategy, how should you negotiate and how should you not negotiate. So the topics that Sri Rama talks about to Bharata covers the entire public leadership curriculum. It includes the real politic as well as the spiritual. This has been a unique feature of the Indian education system. It's not mere external skills. External skills are incomplete and without a sound basis. The foundation of individuals is built through imparting scriptural knowledge in the Guru Shishya Parampara, and it culminates into wisdom via direct experience. This wisdom then helps in building the leader's character and can be applied appropriately in various dynamic situations. We have now seen how Ramayana has very practical, timeless lessons on leadership. Now let us come back to the present and see the role of a public leader today. We would have often heard of Yatha Raja Tatha Praja. As the ruler, so the people. This is one of the foundational principles of a dharmic state. There is a great onus placed on the leader to ensure a right conduct of state machinery and individuals serving the state. Since the people are supposed to emulate the ruler, the people in a society ruled by a righteous ruler will be encouraged towards a righteous conduct, resulting in highest individual and collective fulfillment, or also called as Abhyudaya. A society ruled by an unrighteous ruler, either poor character or by dereliction of duty, will decline into chaotic disorder. Corruption, be it fiscal or moral, flows from the top, and the most righteous conduct at the top ensures an overall righteous order and a peaceful, prospering nation. Thus, while ideals are not defined by state for individuals, they are defined for the state in a way that the state leads by example in sustaining an overall righteous order. That is why Yatha Raja Tatha Praja. Raja is the Palaka or protector of people and their liberties and means of development, or Abhyudaya, whose willpower actively aligns with the Dharmic nation's Purushartha. An associated principle of active nature of state is Rajyasya Moolam Raja. Head of the state is also the root of the state, which indicates the importance of the willpower of the ruler in the highest collective Abhyudaya. This aspect becomes important in ensuring positive growth of nation, its security, relations with external elements, other nations. It ensures collective pride and identity in steering the state towards a secure and bright future. Protection of soft elements of the civilization is a primary responsibility of the state, and this is not seen by Dharma merely as an activity of civilized society to protect weak from strong. Protection of soft elements, including sense of beauty and growth functions, hold the possibilities of civilization and are kept aloof from the lower functions of sustenance and protection. Thus, protection of seers, scholars, artists, women, children is a responsibility that is greatly emphasized by Dharma and is visible in the questions to rulers by rishis of all ages. Right from Narada's questions to Yudhishthira to Maratha affirmations of protecting these elements, this spirit is well understood all through the history. Protection of weak from strong and the powerful is the responsibility of the Raja. But if we see post independence, this has been changed. Today, we see elections are mostly fought on the lowest denominator of expectations. It is a class war where everybody wants the maximum benefits from the state. That is not how a Ram Rajya or a Dharmic Rajya sees. You don't appease one class at the expense of another class. Now that we have discussed leadership, we have discussed the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the Chanakya Sutras, and various other aspects of leadership from the Indian ancient knowledge systems. The natural question that arises, is it possible to even create such leaders today? I'll give you some examples from around the world. Various countries have tried to create institutions that create public leaders whenever they have faced a crisis. Two particular examples. The first one is in the 1870, there was a Franco-Prussian War. The French army was decisively defeated. The quick defeat of the French was attributed to their outdated military education. The morale of the French people was broken. Then there was a response. They built something called Sciences Po, a university that they built to create the next generation of public leaders for France. The intention was to create an institution that will help France come out of its moral and political crisis. This would be done by training the ruling classes of France to lead France the right way. Today, that institution has produced several French presidents, heads of government, and international organizations, and much more. It has played a key role in pulling France out of the crisis and making it a superpower. The second institution that has been built in Japan, it's called the Matsushita Institute of Government and Management. It was established in 1979 by Konosuke Matsushita, the founder of Panasonic Corporation. The vision was to create leaders for Japan who can envision an ideal Japanese society and make that dream into a reality. Graduates from that school have become leaders in various walks of life, including the Japanese Prime Minister, members of parliament, mayors, academicians, and CEOs. These are examples of how institutions are built for the respective country based on their context and their ethos. These are great global examples. But can we build leaders for India in the Indian context? Can we build public leaders for India from the Indian knowledge systems perspective? Can we understand our problems and build solutions in our context? There have not been too many leadership institutions in this country after perhaps Takshashila or Nalanda. Most Indian education system today is focused on providing job skills, ensuring placements, and making people dependent on the state for welfare. We have not produced an education that flowers the fundamental divinity in every individual, that makes a person reach their highest possible potential. This was the vision of Swami Vivekananda. Can we bring the vision of Swami Vivekananda in today's education system and produce leaders that India needs for tomorrow? When we say leaders for today, it means self aware and civilizationally assured. In today's education system, most of us are unaware of what is our purpose in life. How should we contribute? So, there is something called Swabhava and Swadharma. What is our Swabhava? What is our innate nature? And what is our Swadharma? How should we contribute best to our civilization? So, this is the education system that we need, that we are trying to implement at the Rishihod University. It is a combination of Swadhyaya, Swabhava, and Samvada, that is interaction with acharyas or mentors through whom you can learn. You're all listening to me on a New Year's Eve. Very soon, we will have 2022, the new year come in. What does the new year bring in? It brings in a lot of hope, but what we are very sure of is we will face the same challenges as I had mentioned at the beginning of the show. There will be terrorism happening globally, climate change is always on us, there's a lot of mental anxiety and depression and many other challenges. Will 2022 be different for us? How can we change it? I have mentioned several different texts from the Indian knowledge corpus. I have mentioned about the Arthashastra, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, and many other books. There is so much knowledge that we have. Our ancient Indian knowledge heritage runs into thousands and lakhs of manuscripts. And they are all accessible today. It's not like those times where you had to go to a public library to pick them up. Most of these books are available on the internet. There are a lot of courses happening on these books across the world which you can attend to from the comfort of your homes. Can we make a resolution today that we will read at least one of these books from our ancient Indian knowledge heritage? What I'm sure of is among the many different books you read, this one book that you pick up, especially this year, will change you. It has happened to me in my personal life. I was just one among you about 10 to 12 years back when I started to delve into our ancient Indian knowledge heritage. I have become a completely different person. It has transformed my life, and I'm sure it will also transform your life. With this hope, I want to wish you all a happy new year. My sincere thanks to all the listeners on this show on All India Radio, and I hope that what you heard today gives you a very new perspective and you found it useful. Thank you everyone. Namaste once again.
The Ancient Indian Perspective on Leadership. You heard the 14th episode of our all-new series on traditional Indian knowledge systems. Power of Listening. Our expert was Shobhit Raj Mathur, educationist and Indologist. We hope you enjoyed it. This series has been conceptualized by Shashi Shekhar Vempati, CEO Prasar Bharati, and produced by Vinod Kumar. Special thanks to Amol Parth and Randhir Thakur for their contributions. This episode is also available on our official YouTube channel, Akashvani AIR. Be there on the 7th of January, same time, same frequencies. Bye for now.